It is a bright and happy fall morning here on the farm. The kids have me up earlier than normal, which happens sometimes. So we are getting started with a very delicious breakfast. I don't always make a fancy breakfast, and I say fancy. This is not that fancy. But I don't always make a big breakfast on weekdays when it's just me and the kids. Sometimes we're just having granola or eggs, but today we had an abundance of eggs that needed used up and a little extra time. So I am making a Dutch baby or a German pancake or a puff pancake, whatever you want to call it. I've tried several recipes, sourdough versions, regular versions for these puff pancakes, but my all-time favorite is just add in half a stick of butter, which is 4 tablespoons, into a cast iron skillet or a 9x13 glass dish. You can do either one. Popping that in the oven that is preheating to 425, letting that melt. And then in a bowl, mixing 6 eggs, 1 cup of whatever flour of your choice, a little bit of salt, just a pinch or two, a cup of milk, and a couple of tablespoons of sugar or honey or maple syrup or whatever you wish, and getting that really good and mixed so that there's lots of air in it. And then as soon as that butter is melted and that pan is hot, you just pour that right in. It'll start baking immediately, and pop it into the oven until you find that the center is done. It'll puff up real big, so don't put it too close to the top of your oven. You want one of the lower racks. This takes about 30 minutes to bake. Now while I wait, I'm gonna make a morning coffee. I usually have a morning and an afternoon coffee or drink of some kind, tea, something like that. And I am using a tip from Hilaria A World Home. She mentioned a couple videos ago that her regular coffee is a little bit of heavy cream with some spices in it. Cinnamon. I just did cinnamon this day, but she adds other spices. And when you mix that together, it kind of turns into a spiced creamer that it doesn't have sugar. So it's a lower sugar option. And then she just has that with coffee. And so all it is a spiced cream coffee. And I'm normally a black coffee person with maybe a latte here and there as a treat. But this was pretty good and a nice way to change up my regular cup of coffee without adding a lot of extra sugar. And so I enjoyed that this morning. On our puff pancake, you can see here how it puffs up. But on ours, I added some chocolate chips to the kids, and then I made a little pancake syrup. No one else in my little family really likes syrup, and so I just make what I like. I used to do just straight maple syrup. Of course, that's healthier, but I actually like to make one no more often than I eat it, and it's just equal parts brown sugar and white sugar, and then some water. So if I do half a cup of brown sugar, half a cup of white sugar. Then I would also add 1 cup of water, pinch of salt, and some vanilla, and that makes for a nice little syrup. I just cook that until it thickens. It's not the healthiest, but it sure is good, and it reminds me of like an old-fashioned buttery syrup. I'm gonna go ahead this morning and get some supper going. So I'm starting with some beans. I just add maybe a cup of beans into my little tiny crock pot here. I talked about in my last antique haul that I got this crock pot mostly for beans, and I've used it for a few other things, but really this was just for beans because I only have larger Instapots and I needed something smaller for beans when I make them, because I make them a couple times a week, and since we have them so often, I just wanted something that was designated to it. So I add maybe a cup after I rinse them and cover those in water and add a slice of bacon. That's what I'm doing today. Sometimes I add ham, but today it is bacon, and then putting those on low to cook all day long. Ideally, you would soak these first. That's what I like to do, but I did not plan ahead. I really just need to keep beans soaking all the time, because once they're soaked, I could just throw them in the crock pot and we could have a simple side for supper. And it's something that we love. At least I do. My husband is not as crazy about it, but the kids love beans and cornbread, and so do I. And so I like to just have it cooked up to go alongside any supper that I make. And I really just need to make sure I am keeping some soaked. That would be the better answer. But I just keep an eye on these all day because sometimes they do run out of water and you don't want that to happen. They will burn. So I just make sure that they stay covered, checking them here and there. Now my house has gotten a little out of hand, so today I'm really focusing on it, especially this kitchen. I've been in here a lot testing some recipes. You know, holiday bacon is coming up. I have a holiday market at the church and I bake several different pies, several different breads, all kinds of stuff for that. And so I'm nailing down all my recipes for that. We have Thanksgiving coming up and Christmas after that. And so I have just been busy away in here. We're trying to really crack down on our eating out as well. Y'all know I love a good country supper and from scratch cooking, but I also love for other people to cook for me. And so sometimes we eat out a little too much. And so I've been trying to stay on top of that. So I'm going to give this kitchen a good clean in the sink, the cabinets, the microwave, all the appliances, and really get it back in shape so that I can stay on top of it. Now, I've said before that one thing that I like to do, and I'm not always the best at it, but that is with my bacon jars. Anytime one gets emptied, I like to give it a really good cleaning. This is not something that I came up with or that is, revolutionary. This is something we should probably be doing anyway, but I just don't love to refill these jars. I'm not the best housekeeper, but this is just one of those things that I like to do. So I've used up all of my plain flour, and I am going to clean out this jar. Now, I'm not refilling this jar today because I am in a swapping mode right now. I'm trying to make a few more changes in the kitchen that will help with our health. I'm trying to make some healthier swaps in here, and so I'm not refilling this with that white plain flour. We're going to try and rely on my whole grains that I mill in my grain mill and see how we do. Now, I do have some store-bought whole wheat that I'm trying to get through first, but I'm just going to leave this jar empty until I decide if I want to fill it with my wheat berries, because I have my grain mill set up in the kitchen permanently so that it is easier to use and rely on that, fall back on that instead of the convenience of white flour. I wanted a little treat tonight, so I am going to make some old-fashioned lace cookies. I've made these for a couple years now, and they are a favorite. In fact, we have actually converted, I say we, my mom and I have actually tried several different types of flour for this recipe. It doesn't use much flour, but I have tried whole wheat, we've tried white plain flour, we've tried gluten-free, I've tried a whole grain that I milled myself. We've I've tried it all. All of it works perfectly with this recipe. We've also converted this into granola bars before, and I don't have the recipe off the top of my head for turning this recipe into granola bars, but it is just one of the best recipes. These get so crispy on the outside and chewy in the center, and they are just so good. And they are, while they do have sugar in them, they are lower in flour, and you replace that with oatmeal. So these are a great alternative if you have some form of a gluten allergy or a problem with that. You can just use the gluten-free oats and flour. Now this recipe calls for a half cup of butter. You melt that down and then add in a cup of brown sugar. Let it cook and bubble for just a few minutes. Then you remove that from the heat and you add in a cup of oats, a quarter cup of whatever flour you're going to use, a pinch or two of salt, and then half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. You let that cool for just a little bit and you add in 1 egg and a teaspoon of vanilla. And then you want to keep this in the fridge for at least 30 minutes. These cookies spread really easily, so if you don't do this, you're gonna have a mess. Then just bake them at 375. I lined my sheet with aluminum foil. I would grease it really good if you do that, or just use parchment, and then fix the edges with something round and enjoy. Who'd you find?
Orangey.
Was he in your bed?
Yeah. Then disappeared. He likes me paying him though. I think he likes my dress.
Is he cuddling you?
Yeah. And I'm cuddling him.
Do you see that cat in here? That's supposed to be a barn cat. We have 2 of them, and it has ventured all the way across the property and snuck in my house today. I did not even know it was in here. I walked into my daughter's room and there they were. So that's farm life, and that is what childhood dreams are made of. I know it is. Now off to supper. I made a pot of beans, but along with that, I almost never just do a pot of beans. Even with cornbread, it is not enough for my husband. And so one of my favorite things to pair with it is just one of these just little sheet pan suppers, or a lot of times I'll throw it in a cast iron pan in the oven and just throw in whatever vegetables and meat that we have. Sometimes I'll top it with honey or maple syrup to kind of sweeten it up a little bit, and sometimes it's just seasoned salt like today. But today's is some beef brats, potatoes, apples, broccoli, and I'm using fresh broccoli today. Sometimes I do frozen, or I have the last couple times, and we don't really like that. It gets a little mushy, and so I don't know, we're not big broccoli fans either way, but I'm trying to figure out how to cook it. I think that is the problem, is every time that I cook it, it is either not cooked enough or it is just too mushy. So any broccoli cooking tips, let me know. But we're gonna just add it to the sheet pan. I'm also adding a little bit of onion. I am the only one who likes onion, but for something like this, I find that this is such a great meal for people who have different tastes. And so I can have what I want, he can have what he wants, the kids can, pick and choose from what's on here. And so I am putting some really big slices of onion on one side and letting those roast as well. That is so good. I'm throwing all of that on the sheet pan, topping it with some seasoned salt and just letting it roast. This is one of our favorite meals. You can put it with some bread, you can put it with some cornbread and beans, you could add some rice if you wanted to, or you could just have this for lower carb. Now the apples and the potatoes aren't necessarily low carb, but you could swap those out for any number of things in this meal, and I have. Sometimes I change out the beef brats for meatballs or chicken or anything. There are so many ways to do a little one pan supper like this that you could have it every day and have it different. I'm going to pour over some butter. This is what makes it so good and helps it roast up and get very, very crispy. And then top in with seasoning salt, and into the oven it goes at, I think, 450, just until roasted and browned to our liking. Now we like ours a little bit overdone. I always do. I like the outside to be really nice and crispy. Now, not to the point that anything is dry, like if you're doing chicken, but I like the outside to be crispy. Serving this up with a cup of beans, and then I will probably have another oatmeal lace cookie to end my night.